Hello, today we're going to be talking about French and Indian War. The final conflict in this sequence was unique in that it began in the Ohio River Valley and spread to the European continent. Known confusingly in America as the French and Indian War, and in Europe by its duration, the roughly 7 years between 18th of May 1756, when Britain declared war against France, and 10th February 1763, when the Peace of Paris was signed. The French and Indian War describes the warfare in North America during this worldwide 7 Years' War, which is between 1756 and 1763. This was a war between the French and the British colonies. The British forces greatly outnumbered the French, and the French heavily depended on allied indigenous forces to even stand a chance against the British. The war was fought primarily in the northeastern United States and eastern Canada, and it starts in the Ohio River Valley and spreads to the European continent over the span of the war. In the upper Ohio River Valley, the French had constructed many forts, trading posts, missions, and settlements, all enclosed by 4 major cities: Montreal, Quebec, New Orleans, and Detroit. France had wished to constrict expanding English settlement in North America to the Atlantic seaboard east of the Appalachian Mountains. The British did have minor conflicts with the French during the 1740s and early 1750s over claimed lands and French territory. The British were also starting to feel that there were too many settlers for the relatively small area along the Atlantic. The British had small amounts of land and thought that they needed to expand westward. The young General George Washington, fighting for the British colonial force, attempted to rid the area of the French in 1754, but was defeated as his troops were greatly outnumbered. Washington and his troops moved back to what is present-day Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and constructed Fort Necessity. They attacked a small detachment of French troops and killed many, but the French in turn retaliated. They surrounded Washington's troops, and Washington was forced to retreat to Virginia. George Washington resigned from being a general after the defeat of Fort Necessity, but later in the war he would return as a volunteer for the British forces. On May 1756, Great Britain and France formally declared war against each other. The fighting began to spread more and more until it became international. Until 1757, the war appeared inconclusive. William Pitt decided to take command of politics in Britain. Pitt allowed British troops to encourage colonists to join the forces. Colonists were required to provide for British soldiers if they came to their house. By the next year, tensions between colonists and Britain grew to the point of British war efforts being stopped in their tracks. In 1758, William Pitt decided to ease restrictions that the colonists faced. He also sent more soldiers to the colonies to turn the war in favor of Britain. Pitt developed a plan to launch attacks against the French in several areas, and this plan proved to be successful. In 1759, Quebec, the most important city in New France, came under attack by the British. The next year, Montreal surrendered to the British. General Jeffrey Amherst. General Edward Braddock decided to send 2 more regiments of infantry to Virginia and attack the French. The Indian allies of the French were accustomed to using cover and used tactics that Braddock could not adjust to. The French continued to lose battles and struggled to keep their land until 1763, when the Peace of Paris, which ended the war, was signed. France gave up territory in the West Indies, as well as most colonial territory in North America. The French gave land west of the Mississippi to Spain, who had much better relations with France than Great Britain. The conclusion of the French and Indian War had a large effect on Great Britain. The British territory in North America more than doubled, but so did the cost of the territory. Great Britain had to figure out how to maintain the vast empire, and the British victory in the war brought negative effects to Native Americans since they allied with the French. During the war, however, the Iroquois Confederacy had made an alliance with the British. Even though the British were victorious, their relations with the Iroquois broke, and eventually the organization broke down and disintegrated. To some historians, the defeat of Tecumseh and Detroit in 1813 was the last battle for land in the 7 Years' War.